Okay. Hello, everyone. This is CountyLeaks. Today we are going to talk about Nairobi County. So every year, the national government disburses billions of shillings, about a minimum of 15% of the national revenue, to the different county governments, specifically 47 county governments. The money is meant to build schools. It is meant to collect garbage. It's meant to build infrastructure that will help in drainage and such other needs that are required by the public. And it's also meant to build some roads. But somewhere between the budget and what actually gets to the ground, so much money disappears. It disappears quietly because we don't get to speak about it. It equally disappears cleverly because they use a portion of the law to get away with irregular purchases. And it disappears consistently because this is a practice that cuts across the different counties in the region. So welcome to CountyLeaks. This podcast, we mean to turn our outrage into oversight, and we want our listeners to do more than just talk, but become watchdogs in whatever is happening in the different counties and also the national and the national government and the legislature. I'm your host, Nasambu. And in this first episode, we are going to speak about the capital of the country, Nairobi City, Nairobi County, not Nairobi City, Nairobi County. We are going to follow the money trail, 32 billion, not 3,200, not 32 million, not that any of those is better, but 32 billion vanished in a single financial year. In a single financial year. How does a city with 33 billion budget, 16,000 employees, still fail to deliver the services that are needed by the public? You look around, there is so much garbage. You look around, we do not have good drainage systems. And the reason for that can be there is a failure somewhere. To help us unpack this, I am joined by Boniface Mwangi. Boniface is an economist. He's also a financial analyst. He takes the reports from the government, both national and county. He checks through them. He identifies the gaps and the wrongdoings, and then he unbundles it in a form that we can understand. So, Bonnie, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Bonnie Mwangi, born in Kenya, but I've spent a lot of my time in the US and Canada. I started looking at this because as an economist, I compare, where I live right now, which is in Texas. I look at the schools that my kids attend. I look at roads that I drive on. I look at the infrastructure that I see around here. And I ask myself, why is it that we're not getting the same in Kenya? So that's when I started looking at this. And people that have followed me have traveled that journey with me as I expose what's happening with our finances. It's a pleasure to be here.
Happy to have you here. You're the right person for us to have here. And we are grateful, considering it's a voluntary initiative. We are grateful that you choose to take on that and inform the public on what is going wrong so that we can be part of the change and making the money go where it's intended to go. And ultimately, we'll be the beneficiaries. So thank you so much. So each week, we will follow the money trail through the Kenyan counties. We'll start with the counties and then proceed from there. Unpacking the audit reports, we will expose hidden losses and ask the question that never gets old. Where did the money go? This is not just a podcast for corruption. It's not just a talk podcast. We really, really want you to learn and be part of the process of making the counties better and ultimately the country. So we begin where it hurts most, the Nairobi County. It runs on a 33 billion shilling budget, but somehow 32 billion of it has been lost. How does a city with so much potential stay broke, stay very, very dirty, and yet we do not do more than just talk? We are going to begin on the different areas that the money is lost. So let us break it down leak by leak so that we can see how the 32 billion did not materialize to what it was intended to be. So we will start with the payroll trap. So the county employs about 16,000 staff. I think I've mentioned that before. And that is just 0.3% of the population. Yet it pays them billions of shillings. It actually, this financial year, more than 55% of the county's revenue was spent on 0.3% of the population. When we speak about opportunity costs,
Hmm.
what does Nairobi actually lose by taking 55% of its revenue and putting on 0.3% of the
Yeah.
population of Nairobi?
So this is a great question. So, when I speak to Kenyans about this issue, there's often confusion because people say, do you not want people to have jobs? Do you not, what are you suggesting? You're suggesting that, if I work for the county of Nairobi, that I take a cut when it comes to my compensation. So it's often a confusing question. So let's just try to put some context around it, just so we're all on the same page in terms of um, everything that we're going to discuss, right? The entire point of government is to serve citizens. So if you are the governor of the county of Nairobi, you have one mandate, and that is to serve the people that live in Nairobi, right? So Nairobi is obviously the biggest county that we have. It's got 4.6 million people that live in that city. It's got 16,000 employees. And it has a budget last year in 2023, 2024, 33 billion. So that 33 billion is supposed to be used to serve these citizens in terms of making sure there's infrastructure, making sure there's water, making sure that there is electricity, making sure that there are, medical care facilities, right? So that budget is supposed to serve these citizens. And so when you look at how much is spent on, for example, compensation versus something else, the entire point of that analysis is to say, are we actually using these funds in the way that they intended to, right?
Yes.
So in our country, there's a law that says that it's called the Public Finance Management Law of 2015. And that law says that our county governments are not allowed to spend more than 35% of the revenue that they have in each year on salaries, right? And the idea behind that is to say that when we send this money to the county government, the expectation is that these funds, the majority of them, are going to be used to serve citizens, right? So we say that we don't want you to spend more than 35% on yourself, right? As opposed to serving a citizen. But when you look at what's happening on the ground in the majority of our counties, 2023, 2024, 90% of the counties actually violated that law. And
Yes.
the ones that are violating by a big margin. They're not violating by 1% or 2%. They're violating by a lot. So Nairobi, in this case, for example, in this year that we're talking about, spent 55% of its revenue, this 33 billion, on salaries. Again, I talked
Yes.
about the fact that it's a county with 4.6 million people. It has 16,000 employees, which is about 0.3% of the population. So when you spend 55% of your revenue against the law, which says that the maximum allowed is 35%, that 20% difference
Percent.
makes all the difference because, you know, if you're watching this from home, you can do the math, right? 35% of 33 billion versus 55%, that leads to 6.7 billion being diverted from serving you as citizens to this 0.3% of the population. It is disastrous because when you look at the
Yes.
county of Nairobi in each year, Nairobi has never been able to spend more than 6 billion on development since it became a county. So when you consume this much on salaries, the natural consequence of that is that you don't have money to collect garbage. You don't have money to put streetlights. You don't have enough money to build hospitals and equip hospitals. So the discussion around how much we are spending on compensation in this country is central to any discussion around the effectiveness of government. This is not a situation where we have an option. We have to keep talking about this because when you spend an additional 6.7 billion on salaries, that means you don't have money to spend to build a hospital or to equip a hospital. That's what we talk about. That's the opportunity cost. It's not just, we took money and spent it somewhere else. We are saying, you spend 6.7 billion additional, and all of a
Yes.
sudden people are living with garbage. All of a sudden someone goes to a hospital and they don't have equipment or they're being asked to share a bed with a stranger. That's the cost
Yeah.
of it.
I agree with you. And the worst thing is that how someone can rationalize spending 55% on 0%,
Hmm.
0.5% of the population, that is
Right.
just a wonder. It's quite unfair to look
Right.
at it simplistically. But then again, the opportunity cost that you've spoken of, I think that is the important bit. You take it, you put it in your pocket, and then you
Right.
deny the opportunity to have a bed in the hospital as one person. Instead, we have to share, maybe two of us, a single bed. Like, really, that is just not,
Yeah,
that is
that's
it's
exactly
too
right.
much. Yeah.
One of the quick point I will say is that when you look at, because we have to look at comparables, right? So I've spent a lot of time looking at this
Mhm.
issue. And I'll give you two examples, so I'll give you an example in the private sector and I'll give you one in government. The state of Texas,
Yes.
which is where I live,
Hmm.
has an economy that is about 21 times the size of Kenya, in terms of
Yes.
GDP. It has, in terms of the money that it spends in terms of its budget is almost 5 times the national budget for a country.
Hmm.
So last year, that state had 175 billion to spend on anything, including anything and everything, including healthcare, including infrastructure. But it spent 18% of its budget, which was 175 billion, on salaries, on compensation, right?
17%.
18%, 18%. That includes salaries and benefits, right? And frankly, the outcome of that, you don't have to go look for it. I mean, when I open my door here, I can see infrastructure, right? I can see roads that are constructed. When I
Yes.
go to, when I take my son to school, I don't have to chase the money, and that's why I say, well, the money is, I can see it.
Yes.
So that's the state of Texas with a budget that's about 6 times the size of Kenya's budget. I'm not talking about Nairobi, I'm talking about the national budget. And you're
Yes.
spending about 18%, right?
Yes.
Give you another example, a company that everyone is familiar with, Meta, which is the
And even,
company used to be
sorry to
called
cut you short,
Facebook.
even before you go to Meta, sorry,
Sorry?
sorry to cut you short, before you even go to Meta, someone
Yes,
can say the revenue of Texas is very high,
right.
comparatively is quite large. That is why a portion of it is being only a small portion of it is being spent on the salaries of the officials. But you can explain to us also in terms of the population, the number
Yeah,
of people that's having, so that they can get to understand the size is big in terms of just acreage, but also the number of people that it's serving is quite um
yeah.
higher.
Look, so Kenya has, Kenya has 55 million people, right?
Yes.
Texas has 30 million people, right?
Yes.
And so I don't buy the argument that because Texas has a lot more money than it can spend less. I don't agree with that.
Neither.
So my point is this: if you have less money, um,
Yes.
you're more. I mean, the expectation then is that you're gonna be even more judicious about how you spend the little that you have. So if someone can say, well, Texas has so much money, then they can spend as much as they want because they have a lot of it. That will make sense. But when you have very little, right, you expect to be even more judicious in terms of how you spend it. So I don't buy that argument that Texas has a lot more money, so that's why they're not spending so much. It doesn't make any sense. The
I
entire point of
agree.
government, again, is to serve citizens. So what sense does it make for the county of Nairobi, which exists only to serve citizens, to spend 55% of every single shilling that it has on salaries for 0.3% of the population? What is the point of that? I spend a lot of talking to Kenyans about what I call the lack of common sense and business sense. You are not going to
Mm-hmm.
be able to survive in the private sector when you're spending 55% of revenue of the company on 0.3% of the population. You're going to be fired on the spot
Yes.
because of lacking common sense and business sense. And
Yes.
when you're in government, it's even more, important to be more judicious about how you're allocating resources because in the private sector, if you have a bad CEO who's not smart about how to use resources, maybe the company loses money the first year, he gets fired. In government, the impact is even more disastrous because now you're talking about someone who was supposed to go to school and didn't go to school. You're talking about a hospital that was supposed to be there to serve citizens who need cancer care, and citizens go to the hospital and they're not treated. So the outcome is
Yes.
more disastrous when you think about the purpose of
When
government.
you're serving more people. Yes.
Exactly,
I agree with
exactly.
you. I agree.
Hmm.
And we're going to look at another point, another avenue. where money, public resources is lost as well.
Right.
And there is this bit that I will call it ghost salaries.
Mm-hmm.
So they say we have 16,000 personnel in
Right.
Nairobi County. And you would ask yourself, if we have 16,000, I would have seen what they're doing on the ground. Literally,
Right.
most of us do not see what it is that they're doing on the ground. But that aside, if there are
Yeah.
16,000 employees, what is the possibility that about 7,777 of them are
Right.
sharing the same bank account? What, so
Yeah.
how can such a massive duplication escape internal audit? And we are a country that is getting into systems, and we are claiming we are spending 108 billion buying a system so that it can curb any wrongdoing from the start. What are the
Yeah.
chances that 7,777 share the same
Yeah.
bank account? The
Right.
system payroll has never noticed that. And even when highlighted with the Auditor-General,
Right.
it's not something that has been addressed by the county.
It defies credibility. I mean, I don't know how else to describe it. I've often told people, when auditors are dealing with, whoever
Mm-hmm.
they're dealing with in time when they are doing these audits, they have no interest in
Yes.
putting down something that's ridiculous. They would much rather resolve these
Mm-hmm.
issues, right? They raise a concern and say, we are noticing a very interesting thing here. Can you tell us why that is? Um, and there's a lot of back and forth before they decide that they're going to put that note on a report. So when
Yes.
Nairobi is telling the auditor that we employ 16,000 people, but when the auditor looks at this 3-month period, they find out that somewhere between 6,123, I think, and 7,777 individuals that got paid during this 3-month period use the
Yes.
same bank account. Um,
Yes.
it defies credibility. I mean, there's no way I can, have you ever seen, basically that's like saying between 40% and 50% of the people that are employed
Mm-hmm.
in the government of
Mm-hmm.
Nairobi County are couples, right? Yeah, are couples, because how else does it make sense? It doesn't make sense. But this observation is even more suspicious when you hear the fact that relative to last year, the cost of the cost of salaries year over year went up by 55%. So the year before that, I think it was something like 11 billion. Now it's 18 billion. So that's
Mm.
weird because how did they go up how did it go up 55%, this year versus last year, right? It doesn't make any sense.
And can we see
Y
the value of the increment in terms of service delivery? No, we
no,
cannot.
you can't.
Mm.
And because when you're driving in Nairobi, you see garbage all over the place. um, you don't see the impact of government. I tell people we often, for the most part, most Kenyans see the impact of government when taxes are coming out of your check. You don't feel the impact of government when you show
Yes.
up in a county hospital because you're not
Very true.
served. When you go to
Very
a
true.
county government hospital to apply for any permit, you're not served until you bribe. So you don't see any improvement in the standard of living just because salaries went up by 55%. But again, salaries go up by 55%. Then you find out that the auditor is flagging down between 6,000 people and 7,000 people sharing bank account. And then you find out that that's not the end of it, right? The auditor noted 74 officers have the same biographic information. They have the same name, the
Wow.
same date of birth. It tells you everything you need to know, right? There's a lot of ghost workers that are consuming uh, a big component of that 18 billion in revenue.
Yeah. And just to reiterate what you've said, because at one point,
Hmm.
when we just limit it to sharing bank accounts, someone might think, oh, maybe some of
Right,
those say I want to say cleaners, and maybe they're
right,
not literate enough of their own bank accounts, so maybe probably someone is helping
yeah,
them with that. No, it's not that only. These people
yeah,
are sharing like same date of birth.
yeah,
They are sharing they are
right,
sharing bank codes. Like that is not possible. It just means there is
exactly.
someone who registered a couple of bank accounts under their name, and that money is going there. So instead of that money going to the majority public, it's going to one or two other people who are
Yeah.
actually not worthy.
So that's
So
exactly right. There is
Yeah.
also the fact that, so remember, the 18 billion that we're talking about, that money
Mm-hmm.
is gone to the 0.3% of the population. And again, the audit there
Yes.
notes that between the 6,000 number and 7,777 share the same bank account. There is another finding related to this ghost worker situation where the county loses 1.4 billion in compensations that cannot be accounted for. Again, this 1.4 billion is not part of that 18 billion. The 18 billion, that's what they told you they spent on salaries. And then you find out that you have a lot of people that are sharing the same biographic information. The county goes on to lose another 1.4 billion in compensation. And then the author notes a few things, says that, for example, um, 24 officers had their payroll numbers attached to different tax pins. So have you ever met someone who gets a different pin during the year? It's 197 officers had their birth dates changed multiple times. I don't know if they found out maybe that they did not know when they were born, but they ended up finding it. You've got, it's just so much criminality. Some people's basic salary change multiple times during the year. You know,
Mm.
it is just so much corruption everywhere. It defies credibility, and that's what's happening in government. And again, you've lost 55% to start with,
Yes.
the 0.3%. So now all this other stuff that we're talking about is impacting the balance, the 45%, right?
Yes.
That's that. When you think about it that way, it becomes even more depressing.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we are not even halfway, and it's just overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
Then we'll go to the next point. We will
Hmm.
think, and it goes why when you look at the streets, nothing is working out because apparently this staff that come to work at the
Hmm.
county government not qualified enough, so
Right.
that um, we have to have them go for trainings, and it's not even trainings within Nairobi. It's not
Yeah.
trainings within Kenya, not any better. But
Right.
these personnel go for globe-trotting trainings. They go to Morocco, they go to Canada, and about 1.2 billion is spent on foreign travel for them to
Yeah.
be able to train themselves on things like personal brandings. Please speak to us through that.
See, the conundrum in government is that when people are running for these offices, they come and convince you that they are the most qualified for these jobs.
Hmm.
Then, as soon as they get the jobs, all of a sudden they cannot function without
Mm.
having to go to Dubai, to go to Vancouver,
Hmm.
and other places for training.
Yes.
Um, if I see people going somewhere to learn how to collect garbage, I might be willing to listen. I might be willing to sort of to listen to the justification. You're talking about a city that started with spending 55% of its revenue for the year on salaries for 0.3% of the
Yes.
population. As though
Yes.
that's not insulting enough to citizens, they spend 1.2 billion on luxury travel, going to listen to some of these
Yes.
trips. 19 people are sent to Marrakesh, Morocco, um, at the cost of 37 million for 2 weeks, and they're there to learn all about proactive management. They come back. There's another group of 8 people that are sent to the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, I believe, and they're there at the cost of 30 million for another 7 days, and they're there. The topic they're learning about is conference facilities and training. I mean, what the heck is that? There's another 14 people that go to Vancouver, British Columbia, um,
Hmm.
for for another week or something like that. The topic is seminar on leadership, management, and conflict resolution. Conflict. I mean, you would think these people, are we sending people to Somalia? Like, what is going on? Why do you need to learn about conflict
Conflict
resolution?
resolution.
And you need to learn it in Vancouver, British Columbia, of all places. Of all places. There's another trip that sends to Italy. It has 9 people at the cost of 10 million. They are there for 8 days, and they are there to study all about training on strategic stewardship.
It's
Okay.
sad. I'm laughing, but it's a very sad situation.
Yeah, and this one, the last one I'm going to mention, again, there's 1.2 billion of these trips. There's another one that sends 7 people to Dubai, and the topic is personal branding. We are talking about a city that has garbage all over the city. We are talking about a city that took 55% of revenue to start with and gave it to 0.3% of the population. And
Yes.
now they're hopping from Dubai to Vancouver to Italy to Marrakesh, Morocco, learning nonsense. This is what gets citizens angry because I'm sitting there trying to handle my business. I'm running a kiosk or a shop, and right next to me there's garbage. And I see that the person that I elected to solve this
Yes.
problem for me is
Yes.
hopping from Marrakesh, Morocco to Dubai, spending 37 million going there for 2 weeks. Can you imagine? Sometimes I try and ask myself, can you imagine being on the other side and you see people, African leaders booking trips to come and
Coming
learn
to your place.
nonsense like that? Like what do you make of people like this? You know what I mean?
And
It's depressing.
I'm sorry, just to jump in. One,
Yeah,
Governor Sakaja listened to me pretty well.
yeah.
In Express on weekday
Hmm.
from 5 a.m. in the morning, surely they should be up at that time. Around 5 a.m. in the morning, I believe, for 15 minutes in Express, there
Right.
is Ubuntu Africa. They hold a session on personal branding, amongst other things that just affect us as a people. Please tell your personnel to attend that instead of taking 37 million to go learn something as shitty as personal branding.
Right.
And even that aside, people, many times we ask ourselves and we say, it's unfair. We are not being put on the seat of maybe the UN table and we are not
Hmm.
being given a voice. We're just an ally. You went to that country,
Right.
paid 37 million to be
Hmm.
trained personal branding, and then you
Yeah.
expect these people to take you seriously. You're the epitome of a joke.
Hmm.
You are a joke. No one will take you seriously.
Yeah. I mean, remember, the every one of the shillings that we are spending on this nonsense is borrowed. We didn't I
Yes.
didn't speak about this when we started, but let me just help everyone understand why this is even worse. Our country has been running on budget deficits for 11 years straight.
Yes.
Since we got
Yes.
devolution, our country has never had a balanced budget.
Yes.
So we are talking about the fiscal year 2023-2024. So in
Mm-hmm.
that year, our country spent about 3.8 trillion, is how much we spent, across the country. Much of it
Mm-hmm.
obviously was spent to the national government, but we sent
Yes.
about 450 billion to the county governments that year, right? So we spent 3.8 trillion as a country, but we only made 2.5 trillion as a country. So again, we spent 3.8 trillion, but we only raised 2.5 trillion. So we ended up borrowing about 40% of every single shilling that we spent that year. So 100% of the money that we sent to Nairobi County that year is actually borrowed, right?
Correct.
So
Yes.
100% of every single shilling that was spent in Nairobi County last year was borrowed, right? We didn't have that money. We took a credit card and gave it to Nairobi. And so again, we are borrowing money to send to the county government. And when the money goes to the county government, 55% of it is taken in salaries alone. And then you have these trips,
Yes.
1.2 billion.
Yes.
This is insane. It's the height
Yes.
of irresponsibility. And that's why we have to keep talking about
I agree with you fully. I agree with you fully.
it.
Just
Yeah.
simply put,
Hmm.
tunakopa deni, and then
Yes.
we take hiyo pesa ya
Yeah.
deni, we spend it on luxury. Like that's just not sustainable. And
Yeah.
then we go
Exactly.
to our next point. People need to learn. Tunafaa tutafute mtu. Nimepata our personal branding. If you know anyone who can teach them when you collect takataka,
Yeah.
we
Right.
appreciate your input on this because it's just a big joke. So we got to the next issue, and that is the pending bill black hole. That is another
Yeah.
avenue that we are losing money at. And just to summarily talk through it, next, Nairobi, for
Hmm.
example, it claims it owns a certain amount to some of its suppliers or some of its vendors or service providers, but then it turns out there is duplicity in payment
Hmm.
of bills that are owed, such that
Yeah.
the initial amount is paid and maybe someone is pocketing that amount. And then
Yeah.
ultimately, when we presume that the amount is supposed to be lesser, they have actually someone pocketed that amount, and then we have to pay it in doubles. So, and that
Yeah,
is how we are losing the amount. I think the difference, for example, you can speak through the KPLC issue as you talk through the
right.
whole of that session.
Yeah, so pending bills has become one of the most reliable methods of stealing by those in government because, you know, think about it. If you are Sakaja and you got into office 2 years ago, you know that the guys that was there before you was another criminal who was very corrupt.
Yes,
If you
yes,
introduce 1 billion in pending bills and say that those are bills that's that occurred when Sonko was president was governor and he just didn't pay it,
yes,
people are likely to treat that as the truth, right? Because people know that you've
yes,
had successive corrupt people in government. But oftentimes, first of all, if you are smart and you're running a government, you should be able to have a pretty good idea of how much you're going to spend every month, how much you're going to
yes,
bring in every month, right? Because again, many of these counties are not,
yes,
they don't raise their revenue, or they don't, they only raise a small fraction of their revenue. So they know that money is going to be coming in. I mean, if you're getting 90% of your funding from the government, the national government, you know when it's going to come, right? So if you are really good forecaster of how much money you're going to spend, you kind of have a very good sense of your revenue and expenses. So you really shouldn't have
yes.
a lot of pending bills. But pending bills come up when you
I
have
agree.
either corruption, where someone introduces a new invoice during the year. In this case, for example, the county of Nairobi introduces 140 million worth of a pending bill that someone introduced and said they had not been paid. And then even when there was no evidence, there was no underlying contract, nobody knew what that amount related to. They went ahead and paid, right? So it
Yeah,
kind of, it's things of corruption because first of all, the city has a lot of pending bills they haven't paid, right? Um, Many of them from years ago, some more recent, but 140 million is introduced. There's no evidence. Nobody can tell you what that money is for. And Nairobi decides to go ahead and pay right away. I mean, it doesn't make any sense, right? So the audit notes that. But another example was, the city says that they owe
okay,
KPLC
yes.
724 million. Because it's a large enough, bill, the auditor decides to confirm. So they have their procedures for confirming. They get a hold of the KPLC, and KPLC says no, they owe us 2.7 billion, right? Not 724 billion. So again, how does someone owe 2.7 billion and then think that or put down on financial records that they owe 700 million? If you're someone like me who's a CPA, you know that most likely what happened is that someone took money and acted like they were going to pay KPSC,
Yes.
but the money did not get to KPSC. It went
Okay, yes.
somewhere else, right? So in the books of the company, it looks like they spent 2.7 billion to pay, but they never did. So that's why they still a balance. Again, so this is just an example of how this money is stolen.
I get you on
Um,
that.
yeah, and become a very common way of stealing. I mean, the former governor of Turkana, Governor Nok, tried to introduce a pending bill of 5 billion in his last days in office because again, it's very effective. You can come in, if you are new government, you can blame the previous guy and say, hey, they didn't pay all their bills, and so it's very reliable as a method of stealing.
And that you speak about it because we intend to make the process better and not just speak
Yeah,
about it. I'm thinking about three measures that we can possibly think how to incorporate into the law or propose or petition. One, there's the aspect of personal responsibility.
right.
You as a person, you cannot be notified there is a pending bill of 5 billion and there are no procedures in the county government for you to confirm how that bill was incurred, whether that bill is actually in place. And that can tie in also into contract management. You have to have a tracker on all your suppliers and your service providers to know at what stage are they at, what payment has been made, what is odd. You cannot just blindly have personnel who are going to act and
Yeah.
spend that much public resource without being accountable. I think we have to emphasize the aspect of personal accountability, and I think that's the only way we will deter people. And then the second point is on continuity. We change our county governments every so often. There is no governor who's repeated, like who's had a second term. And I hope
Hmm.
especially this one would not have a second term. So in that case, then as a country, we have to think of a way that there ought to be continuity from one county government to the other, so that no one just comes out with these reckless bills and then just says, oh, there is this in place. There has to be continuity in terms of contract management, following up on the service providers before now we can follow up on the bills. And then finally, credit period. And you and I have ever spoken on this. If you
Yeah.
check on regions, something like a company or the national government cannot take longer than a given period to
Hmm.
pay the people they owe. If we say, let's say 60 days or 30 days from the date of receipt of invoice, payment is supposed to be made, and that is the law, then if we have such practices, it means the closure from one government to the next county government will be more clear, and there
Hmm.
will be no passing of pending bills, as opposed to just not having some form of transition in terms of
Right.
process, also clarity on the law on the duration of payment. So I think policy wise, those are some of
Hmm.
the things we should consider to explore so that we can see whether it's a possible avenue to fight this pending public bills issue. Niuluye na nisumbua, poleni.
I agree with you 100%. The thing that people need to think about is that every one of the things that we are talking about here, they are not unique to government. I mean, in the private sector, there are people
Mhm.
that are responsible for making sure that bills are paid, right?
Yes.
So they are not new, they are not unique to government. But
Yes.
what's unique to government is how they behave around some of these things.
Yes.
If I conduct myself the way that I described, I said that someone comes in and brings in an invoice for 140 million.
Yes.
They tell you it's from 7 years ago. You don't know what it was about. You have not seen a contract. You can say that we bought XYZ with this, or this is this contract related to the development of this particular project. But you take the money and pay it anyway, right? In the private sector, you're gonna get fired. You're gonna lose your job. You're
Yes.
probably going to be prosecuted. That's what we're
Yes.
talking about. So how is it that in government that doesn't happen, right? How is it that doesn't
Yes.
happen? So
Yes.
I've been talking to Kenyans a lot about, what I call the lack of common sense in business sense. It's what we need to bring into government. So all those ideas that you mentioned, they are
Mm-hmm.
things that are done in the private sector. If I come in and authorize 140 million to be paid, and I have no idea why it was paid, then I should be, not only should I lose my job, I should be prosecuted. The problem is
Yes.
in our country is that the people that are often charged with protecting citizens,
Mm-hmm.
they have no interest in doing it because, for example, this information that I just read in terms of this particular heist of the pending bills, it's known to our Senate, right?
Yes.
The
Yes.
Senate can call the counter government on Nairobi and say, hang on a second, what's going on here? But they won't do it, right? So this
Yes.
report has reached the Senate. They have it. They won't do anything about it. The ESCC, if it wants to know anything about this, they have access to all that information. The
Mm-hmm.
DCI, if they're interested in pursuing justice on behalf of Kenyans, they have all that information. The problem is they're not interested.
Yep. No. Yeah, I agree with you fully. I agree with you fully. The
Hmm.
systems are failing us as well, and that is the point we're going to touch on a bit
Right.
later. But I fully agree with you. And the next part where we are losing the money is
Hmm.
we're going to talk about lawyers and the losses.
Yeah.
And this is
Right.
tied to the point above as well. So, for some reason, for some miraculous reasons,
Hmm.
we as a government, we are getting into so much litigation in regards to the contracts that we get into. And I will say, as a legal person, I think it starts first from the kind of contracts that we are signing, and then it leads to contract management, as I've spoken about it before. So,
Right.
picking on the kind of contracts that we sign, I will compare it to the Adani deal that we had the other day. where they said we have to
Right.
pay, I think, about 6 billion to the Adani
Mm-hmm.
company. And this is a company that had not undertaken works, but for some reason, we had to
Right.
pay them 6 billion. And that is not an isolated event. I think also there was a road that the French company was supposed to do, I think from Mombasa to Nairobi. And
Right.
because the contract was terminated, we still had to pay a couple of billions. And I want the public not to treat billions lightly
Yeah.
because we are losing so much money. Sometimes when we say these things, it might sound so little, but it's not
Yeah.
as little. So what that says, for me, where I'm coming from with citing those two instances is,
Mm-hmm.
um, you are signing a contract.
Mm-hmm.
I have worked on contracts. And the important thing is you have to limit your liability exposure based
Right.
on the benefits you're accruing from the contract. If you sign the contract and you have
Mm-hmm.
not issued the notice to proceed,
Right.
irrespective of what each of both sides of the divide does before the
Right.
notice to proceed, none
Right.
should incur liability. That is usually the cost that should be borne by both parties. You
Yeah.
move from the notice to proceed bit, you go to the commencement of works.
Right.
Anything before commencement of works, equally, none
Yeah.
of you should incur liability. Why do we
Right.
pay Adini 6 billion? Why do we pay the French company that much money? It's because someone did not limit our liability exposure before commencement of works. Post commencement of works, your liability exposure should be limited to be commensurate to the value that you're receiving from the counterparty and no shilling above that.
Right.
But that is not what we are doing as a country. And then now we go on rushing to courts every time, and we spend in addition to the 15%, 55% of the revenue that we receive as a county.
Right.
Additionally, we have to hire external counsel. Based on 4 lawyers,
Right.
we owe them about 6.3 billion. Please talk to us
Mm-hmm.
through this because it's additional expenditure on things that we could have comfortably avoided if we drafted the contract well or if we managed the contract well.
Yeah. So listen, do you remember when I was giving you a list of some of these trainings? There was a trip to Italy uh, to study something called training on strategic stewardship. I
Yes.
mean, that trip cost us 10 million. You would have thought that if someone went to Italy to study strategic stewardship, they should have some sense into how to be good stewards of the people's resources. But apparently, they
Yes.
did not take any notes in Italy. What we are
Yes.
talking about is again what I call the lack of common sense and business sense.
Yes.
I started the discussion by telling you that the 33 billion in revenue that was available is supposed to serve citizens, supposed to make sure that we have infrastructure, they have roads, they have water. There is, when someone walks into a hospital, there is a hospital, there is a doctor, there is a nurse, there is equipment, and none of the stuff that we are talking about is actually doing that, right? So you've lost 55% of the revenue on salaries to 0.3% of the population.
Yes.
You've lost million
Mm.
to in pending bills that nobody knows about. You've lost 1.2 billion on trips that
Yes.
are not serving anybody. And then now
Mm.
you owe 4 lawyers 6.3
Yes.
billion.
Yes.
And then just listen to what the author says about this particular these pending bills. It says that it was noted that most of the court cases related to issues such as disputes of unpaid claims for
Mm-hmm.
goods or works or services completed by contractors and procedure termination of employment contracts, irregular procurement processes, and poor contract management. In other
Yes.
words, these entire 6.3 billion that we are talking about arose from illegality and poor management and just not being good decision makers. So
Yes.
it is something that could have been avoided, right? So uh, this is it's just sad. The
Yes.
city's budget was 33 billion, and
Mm.
now we
Mm.
owe 6.3 billion, which is what, like 20% of the county's budget is
20%.
going to four
Yes.
lawyers. So
Yes.
you lost 55%, 18 billion in salaries. Now you owe 6.3 billion in legal fees that could have been avoided.
Yes.
And you've lost 1.2 billion on travel. This is, I mean, if you're someone who lives in Nairobi and you're asking yourself, how is it possible that we don't have enough money to collect garbage? That's why when you lose
Yes.
6.4 billion in 1 year, like you need to pay 6.3 billion to four
Mm-hmm.
lawyers for nonsense, right? For nonsense.
Yes.
There's not
Yes.
going to be enough money to collect garbage. I mean, that's just
Yes.
common sense. And so,
Yes.
I talk to Kenyans all the time and I tell you guys, there's the amount of damage that we inflict on ourselves when we put into office people who have no capacity to even make good
Mm-hmm.
decisions. We're not talking about advancing the public. I'm just talking about just paying, just not hurting citizens, right? If you behave like this in the private sector, you're not going to keep your job. And so this is why, I'm hoping the Kenyans listen to this. We started with saying 32 billion was lost. So you've
Yes.
lost 18 billion, you lost 1.2 billion on travel. You continue to lose now the 6.3 billion here. That's going to four people, and it's 100% wasteful because it could have been avoided. It's a sad situation.
I agree
Yeah,
with you. I agree with you fully.
yeah. Oh, one other
It,
comment.
yes. Go on.
Yes. So the other point to point out here is this. It is not like the city or the county government of Nairobi does not have lawyers. They have lawyers, right? My
Yes.
analysis of every one of the counties is that has shows me that the average county spends hundreds of millions in terms of its own legal. There's a legal department in every county, and it's not something what we are spending 50 million. They're spending like 300 million in each county on this stuff. So there's a lot of people already there to fight these cases. I have seen a lot of corruption involving legal fees where, certain people, if you are the governor and you have a buddy of yours who's in a law firm, you send work to them, right? And, oftentimes when these auditors ask, so tell me what cases this guy was representing you on, they can't name them. Show me a contract, they can't name them. So that's a very common way of corruption that I've seen. I'm not saying that this is the case here. I'm just saying that in this case, the auditor said that this
Likely.
yeah, it's very possible. I mean, I've seen. I think it's in Kilifi where one time the county issued a contract to a law firm of a friend who charged the county 1.1 billion in legal fees to
Well,
draft
I'm
two
sure.
agreements, right? Just two agreements. Yeah, and it turned out to
I'm sure
be,
the US
a
took
big
battle
corruption.
after that.
Exactly, exactly. So this very well could be one of those deals.
And like now that you're bringing that out, so we are
Hmm.
losing money
Yeah.
in lawyers because of corruption. And as
Right.
we speak about 6.3 billion, I would like for people to know that that is only a portion of the legal fees spent on external counsel.
Yes.
That is not the full amount. That is
Exactly.
only on four
Exactly.
lawyers, either
Yes.
lawyers that we've not even touched.
Yes.
And
Yes.
these four lawyers are in addition to the internal personnel, legal personnel
Yes.
that the county government has.
Yes.
So as a county, as a country, we need to agree whether we need
Hmm.
an internal legal department or we do
Right.
not need one because we are not able to get to cover such issues, and we are
Yes.
going to spend additional amount again on personnel that is not viable for the county. And then in addition
Right.
to that, when we outsource any labor, we
Yeah.
have to put a cap on the total amount that can be spent in terms of outsourcing. It cannot just be open-ended like that, because then it
Right.
just becomes an avenue of corruption.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. I
you
agree.
have some. Mhm.
No, I mean, the thing that, when we're discussing this, I always ask Kenyans, think about this in your own private life. Just ask yourself, if you're running a business and you hire me as your manager, and I
Mhm.
come in and tell you that we made 33 billion in revenue.
Yes.
I decided to spend 18 billion of it to pay the workers.
Yes.
And then we are getting sued by a bunch of people because of decisions that I've made. I fired people irregularly, did not follow the
Yes.
law.
Yes.
I engaged in corruption, and because of that, I was
Yes.
sued. by certain people that lost on opportunities. So
Yes.
after spending 18 billion on salaries, which was 55% of the revenue, now I am telling you that there's another expense of 6.3 billion, 100% wasteful, and it arose because of my own decisions that I made. How are you going to respond to that? If you're the business owner, that's not gonna fly, right?
No,
So why is it that in government this is allowed? Why is it that these people are not on the streets? You know, it's this is our country's in a big, big, big mess.
I agree with you. I think
Yeah,
it's about personal accountability which is lacking. It's
right.
about lack of respect for the rule of law.
Yep.
It's about us citizens taking a hands-off approach in regards to governance. And at this point, I was like, the amount of work that these leaders, because I struggle to call them leaders, that these
Hmm.
leaders subject us through,
Yeah,
we should use the amount of salary they're earning because we are doing more work than they are at
yeah,
this point. But that aside, let's go to the next point. Broken projects. Um, I will start with this example. The
yeah.
auditors team, they visited a central kitchen project in the Toy Primary School. It
Hmm.
had cracks in the wall. It had
Yep.
no water connection
Yeah,
and it had a gas line that did not connect to anything.
yeah.
That contract alone, it costed 32.9 million.
Right.
And across the county, there are
Hmm.
similar other projects. So like
Right.
stadiums with leaking roofs,
Yeah.
kitchens with cracked walls,
Right.
projects worth 2.2 billion that
Right.
stalled mid-construction. And I will
Yeah.
presume as much as they stalled mid-construction, why we are pointing at 2.2 billion is that they
Hmm.
still went ahead and paid them.
Yeah.
From an infrastructure point of view,
Right.
what happens economically when a project stalls like that? And what
Yeah.
just pick the whole issue. And if you can recommend policy initiatives that we can undertake so that we
Yeah.
try to grab this kind of expenditure.
Man. So remember how I was talking about the fact that every single shilling that we send to our counter government is borrowed money. So think about that. Think about the fact that Nairobi is 33 billion last year. Nairobi raised
Yes.
about 30% of its budget, right? So about 20 billion was actually sent there by you and I, right? And we didn't have that money. We went
Yes.
and borrowed that 20 billion to send to Nairobi. Nairobi takes that money. They go out and they spend 55% of themselves. The rest of it, they engage in
Mm-hmm.
some of these corruption deals where people are given
Mm-hmm.
contracts that they have no
Yes.
business getting. Um,
Yes.
if you open up the auditors report and you look at every single year, you will be
Mm-hmm.
shocked by the amount of projects that are started that are not complete, right? People like their contracts from 2015, 2016 that were
Mm-hmm.
issued. And when these contracts are issued, the duration
Mm-hmm.
is about 6 months or 8 months or
Mm-hmm.
maybe a year. But when you
Mm-hmm.
when you look at the history, you find out that it's been extended 6, 7 years. And the reason why that happens is that most
Mm-hmm.
often when these people get this contract, they have never done anything like that. I go there and I form a company and I say I'm
Yes.
building bridges, right? I've never done this before. I have no experience. I don't have equipment. I
Yes.
don't have people, but I get a contract. And so now I'm spending the next year trying to find someone who can
Mm-hmm.
do the job for a smaller fee, right? So that I can pocket
Mm-hmm.
the difference. That's what's happening. My analysis, I've spent a lot of time looking at this. If someone
Mm-hmm.
told me about a situation where think about how crazy this is, right? There's a lady who lives in Europe, Kenyan lady, who is approached by the Nairobi Metropolitan Service, I think it was called. There was a government agency
NMS.
that took over, Nairobi when Sonko was kicked out. The operations of the city were sort of taken over by this agency, and so that agency is going around issuing contracts to criminal associates. So in this case, the lady is approached by someone who works in this agency and is told, we can issue a contract. You just come
Yes.
in, we act like you're bidding, but we know that you're gonna get it. So you get the contract, And then once you get it, then we're gonna give you a fee, right?
Mm,
So that's how a lot of these contracts are handled, right? So it's a sham procurement, it's a sham tender. They know who they want to get that contract. The person gets the contract, but they have no experience. In this case, the lady that I'm talking about is a
mm,
nurse,
mm,
has never ran a company that does construction, does not have one person working for her, does not have one tractor or anything, right? But they get a contract to build a road. The lady
mm.
is not even in the country, right? Um, and so I'm using this example to tell you what's happening. So when you hear a contract has been there for 5 years, 6, 7 years, nobody's doing anything about it, it's because people are still running around looking for people to do that work for a lesser fee. So it's sometimes they don't actually get to do it, they just disappear with the money. Sometimes
Yes.
they are able to get someone to do it, but when you look at the product, what came out, it does not make any sense given the price tag, right? Because if I get a contract for 100 million to build a road, and then there are five brokers in there, and I find someone later willing to do it for 30 million, they are going to deliver 30 million worth of construction, right? So when you look at the price tag and you look at the deliverable, it doesn't make any sense, right? So that's what's happening. So in this case, there's a stadium,
Sorry.
four
Can
stadiums
you
that they're
hear me?
building. Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Right, you can hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear
Aw-
you.
Awesome. Sorry about that. Um, so in this case, Nairobi issues four contracts to build stadiums at the cost of 1 billion. These stadiums are supposed to be in Kawangware, Ziwani, Kangemi, and Dandora. They cut a check for 223 million. And then listen to the auditors, observations, some of this, just unbelievable. It says the floodlights were non-functional and the internal lighting had not been installed. The
Mm,
field surface was uneven with noticeable bumps and depressions in certain areas, which rendered it unsuitable for football. These stadiums are supposed to be for football, but they have bumps in them, they have the depressions in them, and the auditor says there's no way people can play football on these stadiums. And it's a contract for 1 billion. The electrical cables and wiring on them were exposed. So, you're supposed to be playing football, right? Or soccer, but you have wiring that's exposed. You can get shocked. Um, Listen to another one that was very funny here. So, visible holes in the perimeter wall. Rather than allowing footballs to bounce back when like when you kick the ball, instead of bouncing back, the footballs created holes and went to the other side. I mean, can you imagine that? You know, that's an observation from a CPA. You know, and we've lost 1 billion. We have lost 1 billion. And again, remember, every one of this, out of this 1 billion, 100%
mm.
of this money was borrowed, right? We don't have it. You and I are going to be paying this amount for years to come, and that's what people have decided to do with that money.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing.
It
I think
yeah,
normal. I think at this point,
yeah,
someone just, are you normal? Like, what is it that you're doing? You're an adult. You're an
yeah,
adult with sound mind. I
yeah,
understand each one of us has a shortfall, but the
right,
amount of greed
yeah,
that you have is
yeah.
it's just not normal. Like you are living like an animal and not a human being. This is not human like behavior.
Yeah, yeah. At the end of the day, the worst thing about all this corruption is, and I tell people, we can spend the entire time talking about numbers, and the numbers are big.
Mm,
But what people often miss is the human cost. There is a human cost that people don't see. When we've spent 1 billion
yes,
and given it to corrupt people, given it to criminals, instead of serving people,
yes,
there is a kid somewhere. I'm a product of a public school system, and so when 1 billion is wasted like that, I think of myself. I think of someone who's like me, who requires the people in office that are responsible for allocating these resources and using them to advance the public good. How they conduct themselves around these resources is very important, right? It often determines the trajectory
yes.
of many people, right? So someone has been given the opportunity to serve citizens, but decides to issue billion shilling contract to criminals that come in and build a stadium that nobody can play. Like, accountants are telling you that they look at the stadium, nobody can play on that stadium because it has bumps, it has depressions. Um, you kick a ball, and instead of the perimeter wall stopping the ball makes a hole on the perimeter wall. I don't even
Sorry,
know
I've
how that's
lost you.
possible, but yeah. Can you hear me? Hello?
I've lost you,
Yeah, I'm
unfortunately.
here.
Are you
Can
back?
you hear me? Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Yeah, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I can hear
So
you.
what I was saying is that, what people often miss is a human cost, right? There are, our country is not a rich country, right? Our country is a country where the average citizen is making 20,000 a month.
Yes.
Um, so if you think of in a place like Nairobi, uh, most people are going to need to use public facilities. So when we put aside 1 billion to be able to build public facilities so that they can be used by the average citizen, and then stuff like this happens where we lose 1 billion to corrupt people
Mm-hmm.
like that. There
Mm,
is a kid who's now going to get that opportunity because someone decided that it was more important for them to bank this 1 billion as opposed to serving citizens.
I agree.
So this is, it's very sad when you think about the human cost of this.
I agree with you. And even in terms of priority,
Yeah,
is studies the thing that we need most. We have people
absolutely.
who can't go to the hospital. We have people who are sharing beds, but for
Right.
some reason, people
Yeah.
need to play in the stadium. That is the most important thing. What time do they have to play even? What time? Because you're
Yeah.
worried you don't have food. Do you have the energy to go play? Like in terms of priority, we need to even start questioning why the county governments are
Yeah.
focusing on it's where it involves procurement, meaning they
Right.
can put in their pocket,
Yeah.
and maybe construction, meaning they can put more money into their pocket. But if you
Right.
analyze those projects, they're not projects that are actually needed by the public. So you build markets, well
Right.
and good. But then
Right.
again, if people do not have money to go buy the supplies, if people
Right.
are not all do not have money to actually buy what is being sold, then there
Right.
is no use for the market. And you build a market up to ninth floor. Who is
Right.
even going to climb up to ninth floor to buy anything? Like in terms of priority, stadium is not it.
Yeah.
Yet is not it.
Yeah.
People want money in their pockets. So yeah, just that. And just to summarize what we've touched on so far, we've
Hmm.
looked at just to make it more clear to the people. We
Right.
get 33,000, I mean
Billion.
33 billion.
Right.
55%, which is 18 billion, is spent on
And
salaries.
salaries. Right.
We think it's the end, no, that is the start. Then
Right.
we have ghost workers who are
Yeah.
earning but not working, meaning they're
Right.
eating into the revenue that is supposed to be put to the public, but
Yeah.
also it's making it hard to pay the other employees because
Hmm.
now it becomes bloated wage
Right. Right.
budget. We have the ghost workers. And then in addition to that, apparently we employed people who are not well trained, so they have to go for world tours, not local,
Yes.
not in
Yes.
Nairobi, online,
Yeah.
where we
Right.
have a global world and people can do training online. No, 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 no. They have to go world tours to get trained, and that is about 1.2 billion being spent. And then we have debts where they're just duplicity in payment. And
Right.
then in addition to we spend at least
Yeah.
6.3 billion in legal fees for
Right.
the wrongdoing that the county did to begin with.
Right.
And
Right.
finally, we have now these broken projects that we've just touched on
Exactly.
last. So if you
Exactly.
tabulate all that, it comes to about 32.9 billion.
Hmm. I tell
Yeah.
people that the vast majority of the money that are spent in the country today goes to a few pockets. When you hear me talking about the 1% and the 99%, it's because the data bears that out. If you take every shilling that we are spending at you know, across government, whether you're
Yes.
thinking about the national government or the county government, at least 70% of that shilling is not serving citizens. So let me give you an example of what I mean by this. So
Yes.
I talked about the fact that in 2023, 2024, our country spent 3.8 trillion is what we spent
Yes.
across the country. So let's think about how this money was spent, right? So out of this 3.8 trillion,
Mm-hmm.
Last year, we spent 1.2 trillion on salaries, okay,
Mm-hmm.
out of that number. So our
Yes.
country made 2.5 trillion that year. We spent 3.8, so that means we had to borrow about 40%. But
Mm-hmm.
out of the 2.5 trillion that we made as a country, we spent 1.2 trillion of it on salaries
Mm-hmm.
for 1 million people that work for the national government. So that's about 48%. So 48% of every single shilling we earned was spent on salaries for
Mm-hmm.
1 million people, which is
Mm-hmm.
equivalent to 2% of the country's population. So you've lost close to 50% of the
Yes.
income that you made on
Yes.
salaries for 2% of the population. Okay? You have not spent a shilling serving anybody, right? You just paid people that work for now. It is true that some of these people are gonna be teachers, they're gonna go to class and subsidies and say, fine. But you've lost 50% of your resources on
Yes.
2% of the population. Okay. So now you have to borrow 40% more to be able to do other things, right?
Yes.
Including be able to pay your debt service. Out of
Yes.
that 3.8 trillion that we spent last year,
Mm-hmm.
1.6 trillion of it was paid in debt service. It was debt service. It did not help you and I or the kid that needs education or the someone who goes to a hospital. Did not help them. This is debt services we paying for our, our past sins, our past
Yes.
conduct, our
Mm-hmm.
tastes. We spent 1.6 trillion, which was equivalent to about 65% of every single shilling we made as a country on debt service.
Mm-hmm.
So that debt service is mostly going to help people that, if you are an MP and you're interested in making 93 times what the average citizen is making, the fact that we are taking on more loans to facilitate this, you are the beneficiary of it, right? If you are an MP that needs us to buy you a mansion, to buy
Mm-hmm.
you gas guzzlers every year,
Mm-hmm.
to give you a mortgage, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you're the beneficiary of this. If you're the county government in Isiolo and you want to build yourself a mansion for 200 million, so when we take on more loans, right, it's
Mm-hmm.
serving you. It's not serving the average citizen. So this
Yes.
debt service, by and large, serves this 1 or 2% of the population that are in government. So
Yes.
put that aside now. Like, let's go to the county government. So
Yes.
at the county government, um, let's look at the example that we're dealing with. Nairobi County gets 33 billion. They take 55% of it and they
Mm-hmm.
pay it out in salaries for 0.3% of the population.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you've lost that. Then take on 1.2 billion,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you add it on top of that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Then take the other things such as this 6.3 billion that we are
Mm-hmm.
seeing here that
Mm-hmm.
does not serve any. I mean, this amount does not serve one person in the city in the
Yes.
county of Nairobi.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go down and you add it like that, you look at a contract like this where they issue a contract for 1 billion
Yes.
for these stadiums and they are issued to criminal sources of those in government, it does not serve you because you are seeing the order is telling you nobody can play on this stadium because it has depressions and it has bumps. So
Yes.
when you look at that 33 billion that we started with, very little of it is actually going to serve the citizen of Nairobi.
That is
And
true.
this is when you think about devolution, right? Devolution was supposed to make sure that people have access to services, they have access to development, and there's accountability. And so when I spend a lot of my time talking about devolution, I don't do it because I don't like it. I do it because it's a good idea, but it's not serving Kenyans. So we have to ask ourselves, what is it that we need to do to make sure that this system of government is actually effective in serving Kenyans? And right now it's not.
I agree with you. I agree with you fully. Um, and it speaks to the spirit of the Constitution. 2010 Constitution got passed because we felt like resources were being concentrated in one person, and that was the presidency. And we felt like if we had a system like the county government, then it will trickle down to all the regions and all the people that could not have otherwise accessed it had it been up to the presidency. But actually, in reality now, from us reviewing everything, starting with Nairobi County, it seems
Hmm.
like then we were just devolving corruption.
That's
Whatever
what we
was
did.
to be stolen at the top now is being stolen at the top, but from the lower side of the top. And that is not something that is sustainable. That is not the intent of the Constitution. And we cannot grow as a country if we continue under such a system.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hmm.
So, and the next bit, I think this one we will touch. There is one area that I think I would want us to touch on a separate topic,
Hmm.
but I just want you to maybe touch a bit on it. So it's twofold. How the county government is using the legal process for them to be able to do the wrongful things and get
Yeah.
away with it. And it's in two areas. One, under the Public Procurement and Disposal Act, um,
Hmm.
procurement is supposed to be through public bidding. It can either
Hmm.
be national bidding or international bidding, depending with what is being bidded for. And in addition to that, if the contract exceeds a certain amount,
Hmm.
then the consent of certain authorities, including the AG, has to be sourced. But in
Right.
Nairobi, what it meant is most of the procurements, because, and you've given an
Hmm.
example, someone was in, I don't know in which country, and they reached
Hmm.
out to them to take on a contract. So they reach
Right.
out to their specific people that they know
Hmm.
and they want, and
Yeah.
then they will source the procurement from them
Right.
without a justifiable reason, because one of the justifiable reason for you to direct procure is
Right.
that maybe there's an emergency and something
Right.
like that. But now they don't have that reason. They
Yeah.
just claim it's an emergency and it's not justifiable.
Right.
And they single source or direct procure, and
Right.
then they of course contract their own people that they can steal with, and
Yeah.
then that becomes a stalled project, or
Right.
that become a project that is paid twice that we've dealt with above there. And then
Yeah.
in areas where they're supposed to seek consent from people like the AG, where the sum
Hmm.
exceeds like 5 billion, they do not
Right.
proceed with their consent, but they
Yeah.
continue to procure, and worst of it, they direct procure. Please talk to us, because that's a legal avenue of them stealing. But then
Right.
again, we realize it trickles to the other issues that we've mentioned before, and we need to address that as well.
Yeah. So I mean, I've made this point before that the problem you have, you can have all the laws you want, but
Yes.
if we are not serious about them,
Yes.
um, then they don't mean anything, right? So we have a lot of laws in our country. If someone is reading our laws from Mars or from some other planet, they would think that we are very, be a smart people, right? We put down laws as guardrails to make sure that we don't have criminals, taking over government. But when you look at what's happening, it's almost like those laws don't even exist. I started by telling you about this public finance management law that says that county governments should not be spending more than 35% of
Yes.
their revenue on salaries. But you find that 90% of our counties are
Yes.
violating that law, and they're not violating by 1 or 2 or 3%.
No.
They are violating by, on average, 9%, right? And that means that county governments last year were able to steal 41 billion shillings from citizens just through this one loophole, right? So, you know, and the same is true with all the other laws, right?
Yes.
So, for example, in this case, if the county or Nairobi wants to do any major project that costs more than 5 billion, right?
Yes.
And it's not just Nairobi, it's all the county governments are allowed. If you're going to do something that has a price tag above 5 billion, you need the approval of the Attorney-General of the
Mm-hmm.
country to
Mm-hmm.
make sure that everything is on the up and up. So Nairobi decides that they are going to build affordable homes, they say, right? They go out, they don't advertise these contracts. They go
Yes.
out and they use this direct procurement where they,
Yes.
they identify who they want to get that contract.
Mm-hmm.
It's for more than I think they were doing 4 projects that totaled 31 billion. So all these
Yes.
4 projects, yeah, they were over 5 billion, right? So they needed to go to the Attorney General. But they don't go to the Attorney General and they
Mm.
don't get that approval, but they go ahead and proceed anyway, right? They proceed. So now, this one example that I put here was for 10 billion. So you've taken 10 billion, you've given it to a one company
Mm-hmm.
that this sort of thing was not up to negotiation. Nobody in the country knows about whether or not it was actually good values for money, because if it's something that's if there's a public tender process where 10 companies respond to it and they put bids, right, you get a general sense of what the fair
What
price
is
is, right?
competitive, and you can gauge
Right.
capability. And I will just want to point out, it was
Yeah.
not 10 billion in regards to the housing project, it was 31 billion.
Yes, it was 31 billion. So I talk about just one of the projects here that was 10 billion. Out of that 31 billion, one project was 10 billion. But it's an example of, how does a governor enter into a contract for 31 billion illegally because he did not seek the approvals that were required to be sought by law. And so
Yes.
one governor does that and nothing happens in our country, even though the law has been violated. This is what makes people angry because we have laws that don't mean a damn thing. Now, so if you're someone like Sakaja and you're corrupt and you're interested in making, shaking down the government and the citizens, and you look at the person who's supposed to be the the chief guarantor of law and order in our country, who's the president, and you see the president doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
For example, come in and within a year of taking over, he comes in, he strikes a deal with a criminal associate to, you know, to to deliver SHA, right? For 111 billion.
Yes.
That contract for SHA was done the same way. There was no public procurement. There was no tender. There was no market survey to ask, what kind of system do we need, right?
Yes.
Nobody even said, what are we looking for? I mean, can you imagine this? You come in into office and you say, my people need healthcare. I'm gonna, we're gonna improve how we serve Kenyans in terms of healthcare. But you don't ask Kenyans, what do you need,
What do
right?
you mean?
You
Mm.
don't ask them, tell us the issues that you have with the current system, and let's look at what's available in the market. Let's look at the price. Let's have 5, 6, 7 companies respond and tell us how they can solve this problem and their quote for it so that we can weigh
Mm-hmm.
value for money, right? That doesn't happen,
No.
but the government comes in and it decides that Kenyans need healthcare. They decide who they're going to get it from. They decide what's fair price because when this company responds and give them one good, they just accept. There was no negotiation. I mean,
Yes.
and we are talking about 111 billion, and it's 100% borrowed, right?
Yes.
So if you are Sakaja and you see the president do that, and you have the same opportunity to do it, I mean, that's why exactly that's why this is happening because uh fish rots from the head, ladies and
Yeah.
gentlemen.
Sure.
Fish
Sure.
rots from the head.
I agree with you. I agree with you, Ivan.
Yeah,
It's all wrong. It's all wrong. It
yeah,
just Kenya hats everywhere. And we are
right.
going to go to our second last point.
Hmm.
Uh, we are stating that everything is wrong. And we are saying people need to be reduced their salary because they failed. So what we are going to touch on next is accountability breakdown. Under the Constitution, we have the MCAs, we have the Controller of Budget, we have the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, we have the Senate. These
Yeah,
are safeguards that were put into the Constitution to ensure at any time if the, what is it called? If the governor fails to do what the law requires of him, then the MCA is supposed to check them out. And they have authority. They have authority to make the law. They have authority to oversight. They have authority to call in and impeach the governor if they are
yeah.
doing something contrary to the law. That we see everything happening as is with silence, it means even
Hmm.
then they're complicit. Similar to the controller of budget, similar to the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission,
Hmm.
similar to the Senate, all offices formed under the 2010 Constitution. And even to add on that, Article 226(5) of the Constitution imposes the aspect of personal accountability. If any of the accounting officer does something contrary to the law and then there is loss of public funds, they can be held accountable. And those are the mechanisms the MCA, the Senate, the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission could have used to hold them accountable. But that has not happened up to now. Please say something on that.
I mean, honestly, this is one of the saddest things that's happening today because there's nothing special about corrupt government, right? They can pop up anywhere, right?
Yes,
Um, what's interesting in our country is how every single guardrail that's supposed to be there to protect people doesn't
yes,
work. You know, um, since President Ruto came into office, our country had 8.5 trillion as of that time in national debt, right? That debt has gone from 8.5 trillion to, by the time you and I have this discussion, almost 12 trillion. So we've increased our
Mm.
national debt by about 4 trillion in these
Yes.
3 years. What Kenyans have to ask themselves is, what did you get for that 4 trillion, right?
Mm.
So we've taken on 4 trillion as a country, and the people by and large have not felt anything improve in
Mm.
terms of their standards of living, not their
Yes.
healthcare. In fact, when you're seeing us go back, like retrogressing, you're seeing the government cut capitation, right? I think they cut capitation from like 22,000 to like 12,000, the other day. So we are reducing how much investment we are making on Kenyans, and we've gotten an additional 4 trillion. What sense does that make, right?
Yes. Mm.
Um, and so you think, how can that happen when you have a parliament, right? Parliament should be able to say, where is the money going, right?
Yes.
But Parliament is not interested, because when you ask where the money is going, that discussion is going to lead naturally to, for example, how much we are spending on politicians in this country. It's going to lead to accountability, where we're going to say, well, okay, so so you're an MP, but we give you 206 million to quote unquote develop your county, and all of a sudden we cannot explain where 50 million went, right?
Yes. Mm.
So these discussions are not things that our politicians, our MPs, want to engage in, because it naturally leads to them, right, having to answer questions. So it's the
Yes.
biggest failure. Our president can come in and cut a deal with Adani without involving parliament.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out to be one of the most corrupt things our country has even ever tried to do, and there are no repercussions on it, right? The
Yes.
parliament doesn't even know. Like, Kenyans are learning this from a guy that's sitting in Paris somewhere.
Yes.
During his break from graduate school, he's spending his time chasing some of these details, and that's what we are finding out about. And yet we have a parliament with over close to 400 people, of the most, second highest paid politicians in the world, and
Mm.
they're not interested in
Mm.
serving Kenyans. You have, you know, in this case, for example, we are talking about Nairobi. When the law says that you should not spend more than 35% of your county revenue on salaries, and yet you spend 55%, anybody that with a brain in the county assembly should
Mm.
be able to say, wait, when you're spending an extra 6.7 billion on salaries, that means that the road that was supposed to be built in my ward is not going to be
Will
built.
not be built.
The
Yes.
citizen that lives in my ward, and they're gonna go to the hospital in Baghdadi
Mm.
and find out that there's no equipment or there's no bed. That's the natural consequence of you doing this. So you will expect that in the counter government you have people, starting impeachment proceedings,
Yes.
but that's not happening, right? That's not happening because the beneficiaries of this sort of collapsed system that we have, this ineffective system, is this 2% of the country, the politicians. So when there was a debate not too long ago on Nation where it featured, I think, Robert Alai, who is an MCA for Kileleshwa, who's a fierce critic of Sakaja. But when you listen to his criticism of Sakaja, it has nothing to do with you know the fact that he's not serving Kenyans, right? You can see that the beef is personal in nature. It's about feeling like um like these, some people are treated as outsiders. They are not able to take advantage of what's happening in government. It has nothing to do with serving citizens. So the institutions that we put into place, the laws that we put into place to make sure that they protect citizens, that they act as guardians, they're not working. Your parliament is not serving you.
Yes.
Um, Kenyans, were arrested last year by just going to the streets, and we talk about our constitution and we say it's the most progressive, and it's not serving anybody. It's not protecting
Yes.
the people that got killed. It didn't protect them. The law that tells county governments not to spend more than 35%, so that we can make sure that a kid that depends on a public school
Yes.
has the opportunity to sit in a class with electricity. That law is not serving that kid. So to me, it's a failure of it's the people. It comes down to the people that we put into these offices. If
Yes.
someone is not interested in the constitution, if someone does not view government as a channel for serving citizens, they think government is about eating It's about
Yes.
consuming. That's why you see people going in and they have no problem spending 55% of the money on themselves because they don't think of government the way you and I think of government. When I think of government, I'm thinking I want to serve people.
Mm.
So the idea that I'm going to go there and spend 55% of revenue on myself and
Mm-hmm.
not know that that means I'm not going to be able to serve citizens, I have a big problem with that. But that's me. The people that we have in government, they don't operate like that.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just a quick one before I
Yeah.
touch on the last topic. I remember there's an area that we've missed out on,
Hmm.
and it relates to bursary. I am aware I cannot speak on it in detail because I do not have my notes with me, but I
Yeah.
think about 330 million that was meant to be used as bursary, according to the auditor's report, it cannot be accounted for. They cannot trace which student was paid for. They
Yeah.
cannot trace which school it was paid to. Please
Right.
talk through it, and then we can now proceed to go to the closing point.
So, you know, uh, I have spent, I think I have looked at least maybe 40 counties out of the 47 that we have.
Yes.
There are a lot of bad things happening in government, but I don't think that there's anything that I've seen that is more callous as what's happening when it comes to these bursaries.
Mm.
So I want you to think about the fact that we started with saying that the county government of Nairobi had a budget of 33 billion. They
Yes.
spent 670 million on bursaries. So out of 33 billion, they budgeted spending 670 million on bursaries. I want to remember that the county government of Nairobi has 4.6 million people.
Yes.
So think about all the people in Mathare, people in Kibera, people in Isili, people in all these places where the average income is very low, right? These
Yes.
people need the opportunities to be able to send their kids to school. The
Yes.
county that has 33 billion to spend
Mm-hmm.
decided that they're going to spend 55% of income on themselves, decided
Yes.
that over and above that, they're going to spend 1.2 billion running around from Marrakesh, Morocco to Vancouver, BC to Dubai to learn conflict management and personal
Yes.
branding, spending 1.2 billion in that process.
Yes.
Then they put aside 670 million for bursaries to be divided, to be shared across the
Okay.
county that has 4.6 million people.
Yes.
Think about what that is saying, right?
Yes.
The it defies it defies credibility. you know how do you make decisions like that and not even have any shame? How do you
Yes.
spend 1.2 billion on travel for yourself and
Yes.
not see how bad it looks for you to spend 670 million on bursaries in a country where one out of five people is poor in the country of Nairobi, where
Yes.
a lot of people need this bursary to be able to send their kids to school. Then
Yes.
out of these 670 million people, 300 of it cannot be accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're talking about. So they put aside 670 million, but when the auditor says, "Oh, show me the beneficiary of this amount," 301 million cannot be accounted for. These politicians want you to think that awarding bursaries is the same as showing up on church on Sunday with a bunch of candy and passing around. That's not how it's done.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to apply for a bursary, there's a process. You take a form, you complete it. They're supposed to look at, you know, the information that you put down. They're supposed to make an assessment of your need, right? And then you get awarded. How is it that if that's a process, how do you not have any details for 301 million in bursaries? If it's not there, it means it doesn't exist, right?
Yes.
And this is sad, man. I mean, if you follow me, you know that I spent the last 1 month talking about one kid from my county of Kiambu who
Owen.
touched me. Yes, Owen is a guy who's 20 years old, raised by his grandfather and grandmother who are 90 and 80 years old. Grew up in very difficult circumstances.
Yes.
Everyone tells him the way out of this situation is to be able to get an education. He
Education.
gets accepted to Egerton, and he sits at home for a month and a half. He's applied for CDF bursaries. He's gone from one politician's office to the next, applied for scholarship and CDF, and is not successful. We tell him
Yes.
we don't have a spot for him. Okay. In a year where last year 68 billion shillings was spread across the country in this CDF. 68 billion. Okay. I told you that our country last year spent 1.9 trillion on debt service, right? We spent 68 billion
Yes.
in bursaries, and we don't have a spot for Owen to be able to go to school. And he only needed like 100,000 in terms of, the tuition that he had to pay out of pocket and food. So this kid is sitting at home for a month and a half because he cannot raise 100,000.
Mm-hmm.
And I just told you
Mm-hmm.
that Nairobi spent 18 billion of its revenue on themselves. They spent
Mm-hmm.
670 million on bursaries, but 300 of it cannot be accounted for.
Mm-hmm.
This alone to me says everything you need to know about our country, about, you know, you almost have to be an animal, like to be able to conduct yourself this way and not have any shame.
Mm-hmm.
It's very devastating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. Yeah, we have it bad. We have it bad. And that's why the important point really matters, because what we are getting into is, we as a public,
Right.
what is our role in all this?
Yeah.
Where did we start wrong? Now that we are accepting we started wrong, what are we going to do it any
Yeah.
different? And it all starts from voting. I
Hmm.
think we agree, everyone who is in that office. I will say, I
Right.
was having a chat with someone yesterday, because
Hmm.
my county, my ward is Dagoretti North. That is my
Yeah.
county, but then my
Right.
ward is Kileleshwa.
Hmm.
And the reason, forgive me, we are all sinners, and this is my sin.
All right.
How I started wrong is that I voted for Robert Alai based on suit, because I
Right.
was pro ODM, and
Hmm.
I was looking at the form, I was like, this is ODM, this is ODM, I am voting
Right.
for you. I
Right.
did it wrong. I got it
Yeah.
so wrong. And that
Yeah.
is why when you're part of civic education, we tell people,
Hmm.
disregard that suit thing.
Right.
Do not
Right.
vote based on a party. Vote
Right.
based on Madilism, to what they can do,
Right.
what they promise, what they can deliver.
Right.
So
Hmm.
starting with the voting, we got it wrong. But
Yeah.
that aside, the Constitution, it gives us the power under Article 37 on the right to petition. We can petition to the court, we can petition to the parliament. Like anything that is going wrong, we have the right of petition. And through that petition, the court can address and maybe give a favorable feedback that will stop whatever that is going wrong. In
Hmm.
addition to the petition, Article 10 and Article 118 of the Constitution gives
Right.
the public the right of public participation. How is public participation beneficial? Before a county sets, like, agrees on their budget, there has to be a county development plan.
Hmm.
That development plan will detail all the projects they plan to undertake for that financial year. And then they will detail the amount of expenditure that is going to be put in each of those projects.
Hmm.
We as a public ought to be involved in this process. It happens between sometime in June to sometime last month. We ought to be active in these processes, because if one, we are able to petition on things that are going wrong, if two, we are
Yeah.
able to be part of the county development plan. And then
Yeah.
finally, if we are able to, we can attend the budget hearings. If the
Hmm.
county government has a budget hearing, we can attend it, and then we can demand for explanations from our MCA. Know
Right.
who is your leader, know who you elected,
Right.
demand accountability from them. I think if we
Hmm.
combine all those things in addition to what we are doing, you and I, in regards to
Yeah.
sourcing the information of what is wrong and
Right.
speaking about it, I feel like now we get a grip on what is happening in the county government. And
Right.
then possibly, if we get the support of the relevant institutions,
Yeah.
then we put a change to that. What more do you have to add in regards to public accountability on all this matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've hit every one of the core points. To me, the difference between where we are as a country, as a county, and where we should be, where we can be, is the people that are sitting in these seats making these decisions. And I go back to the example that I told you of Owen, right? Owen has been let down by everybody, right? He's done what he needs to
Yes.
do. We sent him to school and told him to pay attention, get good grades. He does that, and he's sitting at home for a month and a half, and he's
Mhm.
not at school because we have 1 or 2% of the country that has decided that they are going to eat as much as they can until they vomit, and then
Mm-hmm.
that's when they are about to pass out from overeating is when they say, you know what, now you guys can come in and eat what's left. So how does a country spend 3.8 trillion last year? We are
Yes.
spending 4.3 trillion this year. How do we spend 4.3 trillion this year and we cannot send Owen to school? How does that happen? Like we should all be ashamed of what's happened. Um,
Yes.
we do that because of the priorities that we've set for ourselves. We've decided that
Yes.
it's more important for us as a country to pay a governor, the governor of Wajir, to pay him
Yes.
160 times what the average citizen in Wajir is making. That's what we've decided to do with our money. We've decided that it is more important for Sakaja to spend 1.2 billion traversing the globe, going from one town to the next to study, and he cannot apply any of whatever he studied in these places um, to better our standards of living, right? See, these things, this is not, the situation that we're in is not a cancer. The someone who walked into the doctor last Friday after a medical diagnosis, and the doctor told him, look, you have cancer. There's nothing you can do about it, right? You have it. That's not us, right? This is what we've chosen for ourselves in terms of, I
Yes.
know we are not choosing, we didn't choose for Sakaja to spend 1.2 billion like that, but we selected Sakaja out of people that were there, right? Even when, the sad
Yes.
thing is that even
True.
when we often have better people to select, we choose criminals. And so the moment that we realize that we've also played a part in this, we're also complicit, then we're going to start making better decisions. We all have to look in the mirror and say, how did we get to this point?
Yes.
Once we start owning our own mistakes, I think we're going to be able to make better choices. At the end of the day, we need to elect people in office that share your values. And what I mean by values is that, people that, I know you, Flavia, you and I chat. I can't imagine a situation where you would justify spending 1.2 billion on nonsensical travel when you know that there's a kid somewhere that needs to have a class. Like
Never.
that's not going to fly with you, right? So I know your values. We need to do the same thing when it comes to government, right? We need to
Yes.
this it's the same thing that we need to have in government. Values are important, right? And you can often tell them by looking at someone and how they conduct
Yes.
themselves around these resources. Um, and then we need to make sure that we have laws that mean something. There's no point of
Yes.
having a lot of laws when they don't mean anything. Right? If the governor can
Yeah.
go in and strike a deal with other people for 31 billion and does not follow the law and nothing happens to him, then we have no country. I've told people before that the moment the average citizen cannot tell the difference between his and or her own government and criminals on the street, we have reached we've crossed the Rubicon, right, so to speak. And I think that that's where we are now. Because if you are Owen, the kid that I was describing, what is the difference between the national government and the county government of Kiambu and Mongiki? There's no difference, right?
No diff. No
There's no
different.
difference. Yeah, they're
No.
all taking advantage of their monopoly on violence and power to steal from you. And that's a dangerous place for us to be, as a country.
I agree, and that's why I said it's like we are like they're animals. It's like we're living in a jungle.
Right.
There is no humane way for someone to live. Humane person can't be making such decisions. A humane person ought to be mindful of the person next to them. But we
Right.
have people who would rather take 55% and put it in their pocket.
Yeah.
We have people who'd rather take 1.2 billion and go for trips. We have
Yeah.
people who'd rather take their relatives and give tender so
Right.
that they can double bill,
Yeah.
or just even if not their relative, take that money and put it in
Yeah.
their pocket and not
Yeah.
pay the bill as required. And that's and take, because if the bursary is 600 million and 300 million is pocketed,
Right.
still, even as we get shocked that they only allocated 600 million, they
Right.
pocketed half of that, meaning they just allocated 300 million. Those are the kind of
Exactly.
people that we pose as leaders. And if, before I miss on this point, I feel like it's important for the public to know, and anyone who is watching us, Bonnie intends to vie as a Kiambu governor. Please,
Right.
please, please, please. I have spoken to him. I know of him. I can vouch for his character. I can vouch for the kind of person that he is. I can vouch for his competency. This
Yeah,
is
thank
some
you so much.
this is someone who can make your county better.
Yeah, so I appreciate that, and I will say that you and I have encouraged you as I talk to Kenyans, and I'm telling Kenyans that are capable of being leaders to really consider it. And I've talked to you
Yes,
before, and I've asked you to consider running, and I know that you're thinking about it. Because the people that are going to fix these problems, they are not, it's you and I, right? Because you and I can
yes,
sit here and we can go through these decisions,
yes,
and it does not take a genius to be a genius to be able to see how insane these decisions are, right? Um,
yes,
I can take, in my view, a high school student, Form 3, Form 4, and I can give them the data points that's necessary to be able to know where to put these resources, and they are going to be able to make better decisions than Sakaja.
yes,
Because you don't have to be a genius, to be honest with you, to be able to understand what's happening, right?
yes,
Everybody knows that the city needs to collect garbage. How is it that Sakaja doesn't know that? Everybody knows that you don't spend 55% of your revenue on yourself and
yes,
expect that you're going to have money to be able to collect garbage. How comes that Sakaja doesn't know that, right? So we are talking about things that are so simple.
yes.
But the people that we've put into these offices, they're not interested. They're not interested in solving it. So at some point we can spend a lot of time talking about the issues, the failures. But at some point, I think people have to step up and say, "I'm going to do this
And take
because I
the
think I can
power.
serve people better." I have never wanted to be in politics, to be honest with you. I think I've enjoyed being a private citizen. But at some point, we have to step up and say,
I
I
agree.
think we can do better. I think,
I
and
agree with
particularly for me, because I'm a product of a public school system, I think about the people that are not served when politicians are misbehaving like this. I see those people and I think that they need better representation. You need someone with common sense and business sense making this decision. If someone, think about it this way, if I came in tomorrow and became a governor of Nairobi, right, and the same budget, but I say to my team, we are not going
yes,
to spend 55% of our revenue on us, right?
yes.
We are going to follow the law. I'm going to spend the maximum
Mm-hmm.
of the allowed under the law, which is 35%. All of a sudden, I have freed up 7 billion. Just by that alone, 7 billion is available to South citizens. I
To
move on
serve
and
the
I
people.
say, I am not going to approve any trip to Marrakesh, Morocco to study conflict resolution and personal branding.
Yes,
That 1.2 billion, I'm not going to approve. I'm not, we're not going to spend it. So now we have another 1.2 billion that's available.
yes,
Just by that alone, those two things,
yes.
we have almost 8 billion to
I
serve
agree.
citizens. You
I
go
agree.
out, cities are, garbage is collected. We put streetlights where they need to be. We buy equipment. We have doctors. I mean, we are talking about things that are so easy to do, but we can't just keep talking about
Very,
it. We have to step
very.
up and do it.
And you
Yes,
ask people to apply online for bursaries and you contact the schools, get their
exactly,
confirm
exactly,
that the students are
exactly,
students in school and make the
exactly.
payments directly without having to have people line up so that
Yes,
you have a mechanism where you would accept the forms and not accept or find mechanisms on how to steal even the bursaries.
yes.
It's like it sounds easy, it sounds possible. So in
It's
summary,
so easy.
32 billion gone not overnight,
Yes,
but through countless unchecked transactions,
right.
ignored reports,
Yes,
and silence. This is just not a story of Nairobi, it's a Kenyan one. But every leak we are going to expose because we plan to do that for each and every county. And we hope you work with us. And as we've stated before, you know the role that you can play. It can be as simple as attending a budget hearing. It can go more to you asking for the report. It
right.
can even exceed that and you being part of the county development plan and asking for that report. It's boundless. Be part of this process. And also, Bonnie has spoken about you taking the leadership role because with power, then you get to have the authority to say, do this, do not do this. So, Bonnie, give us
100%.
your last words before now
Yes.
we close the session.
So I would say the final parting shot, I guess I would say is that we all need to realize that the time for passive citizenship is over, right? When what happens is that when we all run away from getting involved with government, when we all leave politics to criminals, the natural consequence of that is what we have today, which is you have a government, you have an economy that is dominated by criminals. People look at the people that are making these decisions and you wonder how is it possible that the dumbest people among us are the ones making these decisions.
Yes.
It's what happens when good people, people with values, people that are capable, decide that they are not going to get involved. You
Yes.
can't run away from a bad government. So the
Yes.
solution, in my view, is not to run, is to say that we want to take it back. We want people that are smart making these decisions. We want people that share our values. So do not run away from your responsibility as a citizen. Get
Yes.
involved and make sure that we hold these people accountable. I want to say this as a final point, as I encourage you to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
The county of Nairobi, you know, we've spent an hour and a half talking about all these bad decisions that they made.
Yes.
If you go to their budget or their financial records last year, these county governments are supposed to report their 10 biggest development projects.
Yes.
The second biggest development project, according to them, was public participation. So they spent 324 million on public participation. Um, so we are telling you to get involved, to question your government, and then you find out that they spent 324 million on public participation. They charged you to come and talk to you. My first question is, how is that development? Right? How is that development? Secondly, when you see Sakaja driving around taking videos, he gets out and he says hi to a few people. That's public participation. That's where that money is coming from. Okay? So please get involved. Get involved. Yeah,
It is white. It is white.
it's a while, right? Yeah.
Again,
Hmm.
I cannot emphasize more. Bonnie has spoken about it. My friends keep
Yeah.
telling me I cannot assume people are not active before. I want to say it and say it again. As a younger generation, active citizenry is important. Walk with us this journey, learn what it is that we are saying, and also walk the journey of governance with us because each one of us, Bonnie and I, and many, are taking initiatives in regards to governance, accountability check, and just ensuring everything is being done according to the law in our own small capacity. But if we combine our voices, it's going to be bigger and louder. And I think more change will come from that. Then again, we are going to have more of these episodes. The next county is going to be Kwale, and we will talk through that as we continue. You've been listening to CountyLeaks. Thank you, Bonnie, so much. Thank you, Bonnie, so much. So we hope to turn our outrage into oversight and you listeners to becoming our watchdogs. Thank you so much and hope to see you again in the next episode.
Thank you.